Today I'm reviewing a loft apartment in Denver, Colorado that's been heavily influenced by the lofts of New York. It's a big place with 18-foot ceilings, but interestingly, there's one very important area of the apartment that's way smaller than it should be, and I'm going to explain why. Because I'm here to make sure that every time you buy, sell, or remodel an apartment, you maximize your return on investment. The link is in the description for that, but for now, let's take a look at this loft. So when you first enter this apartment, you're thrust right into the kitchen, and I don't think it's a very good experience. There's nowhere to take off your shoes, and just to the left of the front door when you open it up is the refrigerator. And so when the fridge doors open, you pretty much walk right into it when you enter this apartment. It's not a good way to enter this space. Now, with that said, there aren't a lot of other spots in this apartment to put the kitchen, and so I do think the kitchen is in the correct spot, but they would have done themselves a lot of favors to just push it back a foot or two from the front door so that you just have a little bit of an entryway. Maybe you put some tile floor there or something to, separate the entryway from the kitchen itself. Just something that's going to make it feel like you're not stepping immediately into the cooking zone. Now, the palette in the kitchen is very, very white, from the backsplash to the cabinets to the kitchen island to the walls themselves. Now, the white kind of works in here because you get a ton of natural light and it looks really bright and airy, but they could have made this kitchen so much warmer and cozier instead of feeling clinical like it does now. And as we get deeper into the home, you'll see the contrast between this very white kitchen and the rest of the decor in this apartment. Now, ironically, I actually think that where they've gone wrong here is when they did start to introduce some color and texture. It should have elevated this space, but in this case, it didn't. Because the first way that they did it was in the wood that they've got on what I think is the coat closet right next to the front door and on the lower part of the kitchen island. This just looks cheap to me. Maybe it's just coming through that way in the photos, but it doesn't look like a very premium finish. And so I would have liked them to have gone with probably something darker here to really provide a nice contrast with all the white here in the kitchen. But secondly, and more importantly, are the two kilim rugs that they've got on the kitchen floor. So they've got one in front of the oven and another one in front of this bar area, but they're just too bright and colorful relative to everything else in here. And so they stand out, but not in a good way. So first, they should have had one long runner in here that just runs the entire stretch of this pathway, but also it should be a deeper, darker color, again, to contrast with all the white. Because right now, you've got white with some bright reds and bright blues, and it just doesn't look good. Now, the focal point in the kitchen is definitely the kitchen island, which is really large and a fantastic place to prepare food. But then the secondary focal point is this beam sitting right next to the island, which looks really striking and strong in this space. Now, they definitely made the right move in not covering this beam up with a cabinet or something like that, because it would have just really destroyed the visual openness of the space. So they weren't able to do anything with this because it's obviously a structural beam, but I like that they kept it as is and, God forbid, didn't paint it white, because a lot of people would have painted it white to try and make it fit with the rest of the kitchen, but the contrast here is what really makes this stick out in a good way. Now, you'll notice that the kitchen island is actually pushed quite a bit further away from the counters than what you'd normally find in the kitchen, but because we're in such a big room with incredibly high ceilings, and these are 18-foot ceilings, having more space in the kitchen like this just makes sense. That's totally fine with me because it also means that more people can work in the kitchen here, which is great because this island is so big that you can prepare a feast in here and you shouldn't have any issues. Now, maybe my favorite part of the kitchen is this bar area here, where they've got the wine fridge below and the bar supplies above. And it's just a nice little corner of the kitchen that I think is really well utilized. If they had just put more cabinets here for dishware or, maybe a small pantry, then it wouldn't get used nearly as much as this area probably does. And I really like that it's on the end next to the dining room so that if you want to make a drink while someone else is cooking in the kitchen, then it's really easy and you don't need to disturb them. You can just come over, grab what you need, make the drinks, and then head back to the dining room. But there's one more thing that I think they missed here in the kitchen, which is the opportunity to include a statement light piece. Because what they have here isn't bad with these globes hanging from the ceiling, but I would have liked something that matches the scale of the room. Again, these are 18-foot ceilings, and so having a couple globes hanging down doesn't really do the space justice. And so this is a chance for them to add in something really striking, really large, because they've got such a huge volume of space here. And so having a really spectacular light like that hanging over the kitchen island would just bring so much energy into this room. Let's move on to the dining area now, which is sitting right next to the kitchen, but also next to these big windows that they have lining the entire wall here. And you'll notice right away that the color and material palette has changed completely from what we saw in the kitchen. We don't have all this stark white anymore. Instead, now we're leaning into more natural materials, and we've got a lot of wood. But I've got a couple of issues with the dining room right away here. Number one, and I've said this a handful of times on the channel here, the rug underneath this table is way too small. And how do you know that? Well, you can see here that the stools are sitting on the rug, but they're just a couple of inches from the edge of the rug, which means that even when a person is sitting on these stools, the back legs of the stools are going to be off the rug, which means that you're half on the rug and half off the rug. And so there'll be a slight little decline, and so you're leaning slightly backward, which isn't the biggest deal, but then when you pull your stool out, it's going to catch on the rug. And so it's just a real mess under there. And so what you want is a rug that stretches out at least another foot on either side, ideally something like 18 inches, so that even when those stools and chairs are pulled out and someone isn't sitting on them, they're still sitting on the rug. So that's number one. But secondly, look at how close the stools sit under the table. I actually don't think that a person could sit on this stool and get their knees under there because they've got this structural board that's keeping the table together, and your knees are going to be hitting that at the very least. And so I'm pretty sure that you have to sit a distance out from the table if you're going to be sitting on these stools, which just makes no sense at all. So unless I'm missing something here, this just doesn't seem to work. And then the third thing, these chairs on the end look horribly uncomfortable. I understand that they're going for this rustic, industrial vintage vibe, but that doesn't mean you should choose a horribly uncomfortable chair. And so this entire dining setup looks really uncomfortable to sit at for more than 10 or 15 minutes because you're either sitting on a stool where you can't properly put your legs under the table and you're half on the rug and half off, so you're catching the legs of the stool on the rug and all this sort of stuff. Or you're sitting on this metal chair that looks like you found it in your cousin's barn. And so I get the aesthetics here and I understand what they're going for, but you can't place form over function like this. They need better chairs here and just a better dining setup. Because if you're going to have people over for a dinner party or even just for a casual lunch, they're not going to want to sit here for an hour. I mean, I wouldn't want to sit here for more than 10 minutes. So they need to sort this out. They need better chairs and they need a bigger rug under the table. And actually, speaking of that, they need a bigger table. I mean, the volume of this room is enormous. It's not only super high, but it's also really long because this is all one big space where they've got the kitchen, the dining room, and the living room. And this table is going to end up looking like one of those tables you get on a pizza. You know what I'm talking about? It's too small for the space. And it can only seat 6 people, but in a room this large, you need to go for at least 8 and ideally 10 or even 12. They could run this table so much deeper because they have tons of space for it and it'll just look so much more at home. But with all that aside, let me talk about a couple things that I do like in this dining room. Number one, I like the materials that they've got in here. Between the wood on the stools and table and the rug, which I think is jute, it just creates a bit of texture. And so they're using some nice natural materials that really warm the room up in contrast to all the hard, smooth surfaces that we saw in the kitchen. And I also really love the surroundings of the table. They've got all these windows over here that hopefully they have some kind of nature out there so that the light comes in interesting ways. And then the brick wall here with all these pieces of art as the backdrop, it's a nice place to have your dining table. It's just a shame that they missed the mark by choosing the wrong furniture in here and at the wrong proportions. Because if they had done this right, then this would be a really nice place to sit and eat. But now let's move from the dining room to the living room. And so far, this is my favorite room in the house. Again, on the back wall here, they've got such a visually interesting setup with all the shelves and lots of pieces of art. It's pretty busy, but nothing in particular is demanding your attention because there's nothing overly bright. All the colors just work nicely together, and that's because most of them are pretty natural tones, including what you get on the furniture and even the rug underneath. And so I like what's going on in here. Interestingly, they're kind of tying in both the dining room and the kitchen in here because they've got all the natural tones that we saw in the dining room with the wooden chairs and the same backdrop on that brick wall. But then also here at the desk area, they've got the white wall and the white chair, which really speaks more to what we saw in the kitchen. And so we've got a bit of contrast going on between the clean white setup and the more earthy, natural textured setup, and they work really well together. Now, I have to say, I really love how this work area looks here. I'm just not convinced that it's the right space to have your desk. Because if someone's working in the kitchen, if people are eating, or if someone's hanging out in the living room, then you're not going to be able to do any focused work here. Instead, it would be better to have this in a more tucked away area of the home where you can get some peace and quiet and actually do some legitimate work. Now, it is worth mentioning that the main living room area, where people are going to be hanging out and having a conversation, that's bright and airy. And then where they've tucked the workstation is just a little bit more cocooned. And I do appreciate that decision. I just think that they should have tucked it away even further. And then they could have made this little corner here an amazing library or a second seating area where it's a little bit more intimate. So maybe just a single chair or two chairs facing each other, something like that would be slightly separated from the larger conversation zone, and something that would give this area additional utility. Because I think they tried to do that with this desk, but just thinking about it logically and how much activity is going to be going on in this main room, I don't think this is the right place for someone to sit and work. But still, one detail I really love in here is this potence lamp that they've got attached to the wall. It can swing from the left side of the couch all the way over to that workspace, so it's pretty versatile and it gives you a lot of flexibility to change the mood in the room depending on what you're doing in there. So if it's in the evening and you've got a few people sitting here in the conversation pit, then you can swing the lamp over and just give it a little bit more light. Now, one thing that's really interesting in this room is that they're mixing pieces from different design histories in a really natural way. Because we've got this curved wooden bench that looks a lot like a Chinese altar bench, a couple of Danish-style mid-century chairs, and this Persian rug that's sitting underneath it all. And it's impressive the way that they're able to bring in these different design elements and still make everything feel cohesive. Now, above all this, on the mezzanine level is actually the primary bedroom. And it's not necessarily the spot you would have expected the primary bedroom, overlooking the living room, the kitchen, and the dining room, but that's the way that they've set things up in here. And to be honest, this is a very, very simple room. It's just got the bed, the rug underneath, a chair in the corner, and a couple of other furniture pieces to fill out the space. So there's nothing special in here, and the thing that they're really missing is a closet inside the bedroom. Now, I'm quite certain they must have a closet around the corner or something like that, and we just don't have photos of it. But right now, the bedroom feels really empty, and it also feels compressed, because from here, the ceilings can't be more than something like 8 feet. And with these beams coming down, it's going to feel even smaller. And so you end up in a bit of an awkward position here where they've got such a massive volume of space downstairs, but then when it comes to the mezzanine level, things get really compressed and it doesn't feel nearly as good. But at least one thing they did well in here was choosing this rug, because this is the size of rug they should have had downstairs under the dining table. It's much larger than that one, and they could easily fit the table and all the surrounding stools and chairs on top of it. So, just really exacerbate how small that rug is, when they could have gone with something like this, which would look really good down there. Now, interestingly, they've actually got a second bedroom in here, which is kind of set up like a bit of a boutique hotel. They've got 2 single beds pretty much next to each other with just a small side table in between. And so this seems best set up for guests, or, when friends or family come to visit, then this is where they're going to stay. But this raises such a big question for me. Why wouldn't they put their own primary bedroom in this enclosed room instead of having it on the mezzanine terrace? I mean, the terrace room is very sparse as it is, and it's not a desirable place to stay. So I understand if you don't want your guests staying there because they're not going to feel 100% comfortable because it's not private. But why would you take on that burden for yourself? If you're going to be spending every night of the year there and you never have the full comfort of being in an enclosed bedroom, because remember, a bedroom is not just a room with a bed. It's a place to relax. It's a place to recharge. It's a place where you can leave all your other thoughts outside, close the door, and just be in there to relax. But if your bedroom is in that mezzanine area, you're never fully checking out from what's in the kitchen, from what's going on in the living room, from the troubles at work that you left at the desk downstairs, right? If there are dishes in the kitchen sink, you can almost see them from bed. That's not a good experience. That's not what you want out of your bedroom. So I'm really surprised that they didn't choose to put their own bedroom here in this enclosed room and use that mezzanine terrace as the guest room, because let's be honest, they're probably only having guests a handful of times a year. And these are exactly the kind of things you want to be considering if you're thinking about buying an apartment or you're planning to sell one. Because a poorly planned layout is one of the primary reasons buyers will come and visit your place, but skip over it and buy someone else's. And so what can we learn from this apartment? Number 1, give yourself an entryway. It's never a nice experience to enter the home and be immediately thrust into the action, and they missed the mark on this. They could have moved the kitchen down just a foot or two and given themselves more of an entry area, or at the very least, just change the flooring to some tile in front of the front door to create that psychological shift from this is the place where I take off my jacket and shoes before I step into the kitchen. Because right now, it feels super busy as soon as you walk in, and there's no place to even take a breath. Second, don't sacrifice comfort for aesthetics. I think they dropped the ball here in the dining room by choosing seating options that just simply aren't comfortable to sit on for long periods of time. So if you and your dinner guests are gravitating toward the sofa immediately after you finish eating, then you've made a mistake, and I really think that they have here. Third, take note of how they've displayed objects in the living room because they've done it exquisitely, both on this back wall and next to the workstation. It looks really good, and they've got a lot of different items in here in different shapes, sizes, and colors, but it never feels too busy because they also use negative space to balance things out. And then fourth, don't sacrifice your own comfort for the comfort of your guests. Now, this one may sound a bit controversial, but you'll be spending every night of the year in your home, and you'll only have guests a little bit at a time. So I think by putting themselves in the mezzanine bedroom and giving the more private bedroom to the guests, they really made their own experience in their home less enjoyable than it should be. Even if just a few nights of the year, it's a little embarrassing or awkward to have guests staying in such an open space, I think it's worth it to give yourself a better experience every night of the year. So I'm dissecting a ton of homes like this one, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. If you want to take what you've learned here to the next level, the link is in the description. And if you want to see me break down a home that's part beach house and part tree house, check out this video up here. It's a good one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.